Okay, we're starting on our first actual module. We're starting with module B, which is the one on cells. I had to kind of change gears in midstream. You guys were sent home different modules. If you don't have module B, if you are remote, you can come get one. If you're not remote, then you'll get one when you're in class. Okay? Module B, starting on page 6. This is an introduction to cells. And what we're doing, the first thing we're going to talk about is the cell theory. Okay? Now, the cell theory talks about basically what cells are, where they come from, and all that. The cell theory has 3 parts. 3 parts to the cell theory. Part 1. Has 3 parts. Now, in general, in science, theories are ideas that are generally accepted, but they're not necessarily proven, right? A law in science is something that is accepted, but it is proven. The law of gravity, right? If I drop this, it's going. Law of gravity. Done. The Big Bang theory of how the universe was created. Can they prove that? No. Since they can't prove it, it's a theory. So this is cell theory. This basically tells us where cells come from. 3 parts. Part number 1 is on page 6. This says living things are made up of cells. So, part 1 says, you might want to be writing this down. All living things are made up of cells. What are all living things called? All living things are what?
Organisms.
Right. All living things are organisms. So this is saying everything that's alive is made up of cells. Does that include plants?
Yes.
Yeah, plants are alive. Mushrooms? Yes. Mushrooms are alive. Anything that grows and reproduces is considered to be alive. So, sorry. So all organisms, anything that grows, reproduces, then that's going to be considered to be alive. Okay? So it says living things are all made up of cells. A cell is the smallest unit that can be alive, right? So you can't go any smaller than a cell and be alive. What's smaller than a cell?
Virus?
Viruses are smaller than cells. Viruses are kind of tricky because sometimes viruses act like they're alive and sometimes they don't. So viruses are on that line of being living things and not living things, like this coronavirus thing. It's not necessarily alive. That's why we got to wear these things, because the virus can't move on its own. The only way it moves is being transported through particles, spit, whatever. And from you guys wearing masks, the inside of your mask gets wet, right? That's the water coming out of your lungs, and that can carry the virus, but the virus can't move on itself. So yes, viruses are small, smaller than a cell. They're not necessarily alive. I was thinking more of atoms. Atoms are way smaller. Atoms of elements, they're not alive. Molecules, they're not alive. You can have a molecule of water, but it's not alive. If we go on to page 8, this tells us The second part of cell theory is that cells are the basic building blocks of life. Oh, that's hard to read.
I need to find an expo marker that actually works.
Cells are the basic building blocks of life. You guys see how, like, number 1 and number 2 are kind of related? Number 1, it says all living things are made up of cells, and number 2 says cells are the basic building blocks of life. I think those are kind of opposites of each other, so that makes sense. Again, on page 8, it talks about organisms, so we're talking about all living things. You have unicellular. What does unicellular mean?
One.
One. Unicycle has one wheel, right? So unicellular is one cell. Multicellular means it has multiple, more than one, right? A way that these cells are different, if you have a multicellular organism, such as you, right? You have muscle cells, skin cells, bone cells, nerve cells. You've got all these different types of cells, and they all rely on each other to do a job. If it is unicellular, then that one cell has to do every job to keep that organism alive. Now, unicellular stuff is obviously going to be really, really, really small. All right? Third part of cell theory. Cells come from other cells. Cells come from other cells. Now that's through the process of mitosis. We'll get into that later. Cells come from cells. They split. On page 9, you've got a picture of a cell dividing. Basically, one cell divides, becomes 2. Those 2 divide, become 4. So you end up getting really high numbers really fast.
Asexual reproduction.
Yes, if it's just one cell, that is asexual reproduction. All right. Page 10 is the last little thing to do here. And this is talking about the scale of cells, how small they are. In order to view a cell, they're obviously microscopic. So you're going to have to use a microscope to look at it. Okay? We have a couple YouTube videos that we're going to watch over cell theory. And we're also going to do a Google form over cell theory.